Well, Juve fans, the good news is we could only be a matter of weeks away until the glorious return of Mr. Allegri. Welcome to the Anglo-Italian pod. As always, my name is Rory. This week, I'm joined by just Adam, but he's more than enough. Adam, how we doing, man?
Thank you, Rory. I feel very honoured with that. Keeping very well. Yeah, not a bad weekend. Apart from the football, as I spoke to you offline, unfortunately, as a football fan, you go to these matches with lots of hope, even if it is in the bare pit of the UK in Birmingham's sake. But nonetheless, unfortunately, no 3 points for Wycombe Wanderers this weekend. We went out with a whimper, it's fair to say, Rory, but. Never mind, there was plenty of action in Serie A, in particular, for me to dive into. So more importantly, Rory, how are things in Milan?
Not bad. Not bad. Yeah, I feel like most of our weekends are like, when we say, how was your weekend? It's like, yeah, it was pretty good apart from the football. And then we proceed to talk about the football. My weekend was all right. I sat and watched, actually, I had the second screen as I watched Bari against Sampdoria. Because I thought, this is a really big game. Let's see how this gets on. You'll never guess. Bari drew. That is indeed their 14th draw of the season as they continue to just about keep themselves out of the playoff spot. It was an okay game. Sampdoria really are no good shakes, but it was good to watch Bari a little bit. And always a good excuse to have a double screen, right? Always enjoy.
Yeah, of course.
They feel a bit like Bielsa locked in my cave when I've got two screens on a go.
You sat on a bucket, more importantly.
The missus insists on it. It was a fine weekend, and the Alex did me proud in the end with a beautiful 3-1 win, which I really enjoyed. But yeah, lots of stuff in Serie A this weekend. All kind of. No one wants to win the league, guys. No. I don't know what's going on. They all seem to just not be that bothered. We'll be talking about what was a bit of a drab game, but kind of intriguing, I suppose, in Naples, and Napoli won into 1. We'll then, of course, head to the San Siro, where I've never seen a game where I thought it was more finished than Lazio 1, Milan 0, and then it went mental. We'll be jumping into that one and pulling that one apart. Roma continue their meteoric rise up the table under Mr. Ranieri as they continue to get the wins. A big comeback win against a difficult Como side here. But don't worry, because Fabregas thinks they won. And then we'll be wrapping up the rest of the games elsewhere as there's egg on Adam's face with Casadei. I can't wait to get into that. And Bologna beat Cagliari 2-1. And we'll be wrapping up all the information there. And, of course, be keeping an eye on Juve Hellas, as Hellas have just had a goal disallowed at half-time. So the protests outside the Juve stadium could be getting louder. Who knows? But before we get into that, there are, of course, some stories that caught our eyes this weekend. Now, Adam, the first one, I don't know if you saw this. I really enjoyed this midweek. Marcus Thuram stopping his car on the way into the training ground to get a picture with the Lautaro lookalike. It was insane how much he looks like him.
It did. It certainly looks like him from the last few weeks, if anything, because there's been a bit of question marks over his fitness, right? And certainly looks like he'd been in a pizzeria near Naples, or should we say in Milan. So very much a good and canny lookalike. If anything, Rory, we should probably describe him almost like that Jamie Vardy lookalike that suddenly peeps out for the promotion parties, right?
Yeah, and he gets promotional WKD at every event or something, I'm pretty sure. Like just all the WKD he can drink. I really enjoyed that. I did kind of, is it him who's been on the pitch in the last couple of matches? We cannot confirm or deny, unfortunately. But I really love how much Marcus Thuram enjoyed it. It was like, whoa, stop, I want a picture with you. Even the eyebrows were like manicured like Lautaro. To be fair to him, the guy's trying to look like Lautaro, but he does look very like him. I enjoyed that one. And the next story that caught our eye this weekend, of course, happened all the way down in Serie B, our favourite team. Well, two of our favourite teams, Cesena for the Spendi, and of course, Salernitana for the good times. Well, Cesena did run out 2-0 winners, but Salernitana did have a chance to score the penalty when Klinsmann, the goalkeeper. Now, Adam, I'm not sure if he's actually a relative, but he must be with a name like Klinsmann, right? You think?
Sounds like it. Does he dive a lot?
Yeah, there can't be too many Klinsmen around. But he turns around to the ball boy and says to the ball boy, Ivan, who's now become a bit of a celebrity, which way should I dive? And Ivan says, go to the right. He dives to the right, saves the penalty, keeps Cesena in the game. And then the goalkeeper gifts the lad his shirt and his gloves at the end of the game to say thank you. Adam, imagine walking into his squadra media this morning. He'd be king of the yard.
I mean, he'd be loving it, wouldn't he? You can imagine his little hands in those big gloves, trying to show off to his little friends what he'd actually achieved that weekend. But what a hell of a story. That's a fantastic story. Never thought a goalkeeper would trust a kid's intuition in terms of saving a penalty. But that's what it's come to with Salernitana these days. Unfortunately, they're that predictable these days, Rory.
It's incredibly blasé attitude from the goalkeeper, isn't it? What should I do, mate? Oh, okay, cool, right, let's see. I do love everything about it, and it's fantastic. It's a fantastic story.
It's beautiful. Absolutely beautiful.
And we are back, and it's time to start in Serie A, all the way down in Naples. And it finished Napoli 1, Inter 1. Now, Adam, I think this was truly, to fit the cliche, a game of two halves. Inter really came out first half and had a very clear game plan. Get the goal and then protect it. Second half was very much just protect it. I think their XG in the second half was a grand total of 0.00. They did nothing in the second half. But to be fair to Napoli, they kept pushing, they kept trying, they did get the goal in the end. Well, let's go through the game, really. The first real moment of quality was the DiMarco free kick, of course. Now, he's been getting a bit of criticism recently, not been his usual self, his form not been as imperious as he has been in the past. That could be several factors, mainly the fact that all the Inter players are absolutely knackered at the moment. None of them seem to run. But put that man on a dead ball 35 yards from goal. It was like one of those free kicks where you watch it and go, why don't players do that every time? I don't understand. Like, he made it look so easy that I was just like, how can a player not do that every time? That's like the biggest compliment I can play to him. Just unbelievable.
And we know he's got that in his locker, right? Unfortunately, as you allude to, his form hasn't been great. He doesn't look like a player that was playing with a lot of confidence either. But that moment kind of reminded us all of what he has got, in terms of quality and what he can add to this Inter squad. But yeah, I think we haven't seen enough of that from DiMarco, whether that be from set pieces or in his general play, should we say. And as you allude to, that was the breakthrough moment from an Inter perspective in that particular for the first half. They had the moments, but to Napoli's credit, they still kind of went about the business in the same manner. They tried to have efforts on the Inter goal. And as you allude to, in that second half, it was very compelling. 12 shots on target, just couldn't really get the ball in the back of the net up until the man that we didn't think would be a success at Napoli, given that he was only a loan from Bournemouth, but Philip Billing, who manages to create a bit of drama for this title race, right, Rory? Because I don't think we anticipated that, even in the 87th minute, that he would turn up and maybe equalise this particular goal. But what a goal and what drama that's created now in this title race.
Yeah, I think it was a really nice moment for him because he was a player that, I know, look, he didn't get the headlines when he came in and we were kind of half laughing at, why have they brought in Philip Billing? They're trying to do everything on a budget. But I remember that 22-23 season in the Premier League, he scored, I want to say 7-10 goals where he was just running into the box, late runs into the box, and he was finding goals. And I remember at the time being we covered it, and I remember talking this is a guy who, he's a very good midfielder, he's capable, and it just felt like rolling back the years a little bit, if 2 years counts as rolling back the years, but rolling back the years a bit of yeah, I remember that's what he could do. It feels like he kind of disappeared. And the determination he showed it not only for the first run, but then with the rebound as well to continue his run and be the first one there. I thought it was something that not a lot of the other players on the team had done throughout the game. A lot of the attack was very static. Mainly Lukaku, I think, was very static. I think the headline of him playing against one of his several old teams in the league now, but playing against one of his old teams, he kind of felt like he never really got into the game. And I feel like there weren't enough willing runners there. McTominay can do it, but then once Gilmour comes off, Billing can also support him in doing that. I think it was a very clever substitution. And just that moment alone kind of makes the loan worth it, regardless of what happens from here on out, if you know what I mean. Because if Inter had won that, they go 4 points clear. And then you're kind of thinking, okay, well, it's almost a cakewalk now to the end of the season, because you don't expect him to, even this form of Inter, and even in the current fitness levels, you don't expect him to drop that many points. So I think it's just an absolutely monumental goal and a huge moment. You could see by his celebrations as well just how much he enjoyed that goal. It was insane. Everybody swamped him on the pitch. An incredible moment. But there's a few players I wanted to kind of point out. The first one, Raspadori, had a pretty difficult evening, especially the moment in the first half where it kind of bounces off his knee and he just doesn't get his touch right. I feel like he was still the more dangerous between him and Lukaku. He was still the one that was more lively, but it kind of felt like at that moment, watching his performance, it was going to be one of those nights for Napoli, right?
Potentially. I thought he linked up quite well at times. I didn't think he necessarily had a bad game. But yeah, I can understand the frustration piece, especially with his record, especially in, it seems to be in Naples as well, where he doesn't seem to do very much in Naples. It seems to be away from home that he's better. But I think given the circumstances, he's done quite well in recent games. And I thought he was the best of a bad bunch in some respects, because I don't think necessarily there's too many shout-out players. I think Stanislav Lobotka was really quite superb in terms of what he offered. I think that's probably one of his better performances this season, I want to say. I haven't necessarily seen something that he's dominated the play like he did there. Also, shout out to Rahmani. I thought he was better in terms of marshalling that defensive line as well. I think that was one of his better games. Obviously, Billy Gilmore is a shout out as well, considering he hasn't had much game time as well. And actually, Noah Okafor, he offered a bit more threat compared to Spinazzola. I know he's always another one that we've joked about on this podcast, in particular for his transfer to Napoli. But I thought actually got the better out of his wing backs, in particular Denzel Dumfries running at him. And yeah, I thought he was really good as well when he came on. I felt generally, and I put this in my notes, I think Conte would be the happier of the two managers, especially Rory, when we kind of allude to the fact that Inter have got some further injuries now added as a result of this game. You know, the likes of Çalhanoğlu coming off as well as Di Marco. And although he's alluded to the fact that Bastoni wasn't an injury as such, I mean, the fact that he took him on, and I thought Bastoni was probably one of the stalwarts from a defensive point of view, you know, blocking a lot of the kind of moments, in particular from Lukaku. I think he was one of the better defenders on the night as well. So for him to come off, I know it's more possibly precautionary, but I think that all tallies up to what seems to be, for me anyway, Rory, like a real issue around depth, because it can't be said that Inter haven't rotated their teams, but certainly from a point of view of depth, they haven't got enough of that quality. I think they've had a bad pre-season, which has ultimately had its impact on this season. You can see in the form, the lethargicness of these players as well. They've just seemed so tired now. And we're in this point in the season where they need key players to stand up and be counted. And I feel they haven't got the energy levels to continue this Inzaghi style of football. So it's going to be fascinating from a point of view of like just seeing if they can muster enough energy to do it in the league, do it in the Coppa Italia, and also the Champions League. I think something's got to give, unfortunately. Something's going to give. And I feel it's probably this Scudetto race. But I'm not necessarily saying it's going to go in a favour of Napoli, because I feel there is signs of Napoli where they're struggling as well. So how do you see this situation? Because whilst we're reflecting it's a draw and it's probably more favourable towards Inter, actually in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't feel like it's very favourable to them.
Yeah, well, look, we always keep coming back to the point that Napoli have one game a week, basically. They have no other competitions that they're involved in. And this is where maybe when Inter are looking at how injured their squad is, how tired their squad is, that Conte really needs to turn around to the Napoli players and be like, all we've got to do is just do our job. If we just do our job and keep going, then they are going to slip up. They're going to be like 2 games a week. They're going to be caught between 2 stools. They're going to they've got a tricky tie against Feyenoord. Like I'd expect them to get through against Feyenoord, but then how do they do post those games, right? How do they do when they're flying back and coming straight into another game? Like, I think this is where the one game a week could really pay off for Napoli. But I think you made a really interesting point on Bastoni, because I thought he was the best defender by miles. I thought he was like not only the blocks, but his passing range is just mental. There were so many 60-yard passes he just sprayed across and switched to play to the other side of the pitch and just broke out, completely opened the game up. And I think there's a really interesting thing that I saw that. So in the last couple of games, he's taken off Bastoni. So against Milan, Inzaghi took off Bastoni in the 82nd. Milan scored in the 89th. Against Udinese, he came off in the 75th. Udinese scored in the 83rd. Torino off in the 82nd, conceded in the 87th. Juve off in the 62nd, conceded in the 74th. And then this weekend against Napoli, off in the 80th, conceded in the 87th. Now, look, this could be general tiredness throughout the squad. They're all pretty late substitutions. It could be the fitness across the board. But it does scream that Bastoni is kind of the one that's keeping that defence together, or is the one who's more capable of just putting in that extra block or quieting down that striker. And I think it kind of points to Inzaghi's management across these big games now. This is another big game that Inter haven't won. Obviously not beaten Milan or Juve this year.
Yeah.
Is this now a trend of him in big games, just not being able to make the decisions that get the result over the line? Like, do you just say, Bastoni, you've got to do the next 10 minutes, but then against Feyenoord in Europe, we give you a rest and just play someone else. But for these 10 minutes, we need you.
I think it boils down to that point that I made around depth, really, as well. Purely because, I've said it for a number of episodes now. The likes of Acerbi, I think he's probably got one more season at best in him. They need to transition some of these players now. Unfortunately, they've come to a point where I think they've played as much as they can, a lot of these players, in that system that Inzaghi desires, right? The fact that when we saw Zalewski kind of being brought in and he seemed to have a lot more energy than a lot of the players that were in that Inter lineup kind of tells you its own story, that actually they need rejuvenating, they need some fresh blood. I thought actually someone that we haven't called out, Josip Martinez, had a very good game in goal well for Inter again. And I know that he was criticised slightly for his kicking last week, but this week I thought he was really assured. Really looked good. I think it's going to be an interesting scenario if he carries on with this kind of form, whether Jan Sommer stands a chance of being back into the fold. Because I just think that's what Inter are lacking. Unfortunately, though, Rory, it's not going to happen overnight, unfortunately, due to the circumstances of Inter's finances and the fact that I think, there is that desirability to rejuvenate and maybe move on certain players. I think it's a huge window coming up in the summer. But I will also caveat this by saying Inzaghi's kind of style and tactics don't seem to diversify very much, a bit like Conte, where we have that argument about having no plan B. You can see in terms of there is no kind of dribblers within that squad. And I feel there's that lack of element of like change and agility to, when you have those scenarios where you're struggling, he doesn't necessarily have something else that he can lean towards. He doesn't have that optionality on the bench. So I think there's some criticism aimed at Inzaghi, but equally it's the squad itself. I think it's run its course. It'll be fascinating to actually see if there are going to be many big bids in the summer for certain players, and whether Inter could be tempted if there was a massive bid on the likes of Barella or Bastoni, whether they would necessarily look to cash in just in case that allows them the ability to kind of pump that back into squad. But I think it's going to be difficult. Personally, I just don't see those kind of lump sums being available. I think the likes of Barella and Bastoni have kind of declared themselves as wanting to stay at Inter. So that only leaves you maybe a handful, maybe a Marcus Thuram, maybe a Çalhanoğlu, maybe a Lautaro. Maybe that would be a consideration. But bar that, I don't see many of those players maybe attracting those kind of bids. Maybe a Denzel Dumfries. I know Jan Bissek has always been kind of floated in the past as well. So I don't see it happening. And I wonder what that kind of future looks like for Inter. I feel they need to be quite savvy in that marketplace. And do they go for another Jan Bissek style signature, players that are unknown, where they can go in early, bring them into the club and get them involved at an early stage? Might not be involved in the match day scenario, but I think there's certain individuals that we know between us, the likes of Correa, the likes of Asllani, where they've had the chances. It's not going to work out for them going forward, so they need to move on those players, I feel. So I think this kind of, or should I say, summer window is going to be very fascinating from an Inter perspective.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of like you said, there's a lot of deadwood to shift, isn't there? I'm not sure what Correa did when he came on beyond to just lightly jog around the pitch. It was pretty.
It's embarrassing, wasn't it?
It's pretty embarrassing to watch. I think, and a few of the signings this summer just haven't worked out. Like Taremi, in theory, is a good striker. He's like an experienced, strong.
Yeah.
It gives you a different profile of striker. It just hasn't worked out.
No.
And I think a few of those signings, whereas in the last couple of years they have worked out, this one hasn't. And that's what happens with transfers. Each one's a risk, each one's a gamble. So they've got to look again. And Marotta, I'm sure, will have all his targets. And there's already free transfers lined up that I've seen that they're kind of eyeing up. And I'm sure he'll be able to turn it around on a shoestring because that's what they've done a million times. So I think he'll definitely be able to do it. And if they still win the scudetto this year, then it makes Inzaghi an even more incredible coach. And I think, look, they're still 1 point clear. They're still massively favourites for this. I just think he needs to manage his squad a bit better in terms of sharing the kilometres around because they all look a little bit tired at the minute. But we do need to give Napoli a bit of credit. Obviously, it doesn't they would have rather won this game, but they've been on a massive slump. This is a kind of draw that feels like a win, right? So this is one that Conte can go, okay, now we kick on. Like even a player like Buongiorno coming back from an injury, starting to look a bit better. He's looked a bit rusty in his last few games. You've got players like Gilmour getting a bit more time, although he did go off injured. But maybe there's a bit of a push of energy now for this team, right?
I think so, yeah. I'm just having a look at the fixture list, Rory, and there isn't many big teams that have to face. The teams they have to face are the teams that are struggling. You might say there's a few potential banana skins in the likes of maybe a Milan at home, for example, or they're away to Bologna in a few weeks' time. But I'm looking at it, next few games, Fiorentina at home, Venezia away, which again could be a banana skin, but then they're at home to Milan, away to Bologna, at home to Empoli, and then away to Monza. And then they've got also a home game against Torino at the turn of April before they then entertain the main games. And I just look at the run-in and I feel it's definitely kind of favourable for Napoli now. You know, they've had all the big games out of the way. Like you alluded to, they're not in any other competitions. So it is now destined in their hands in some respects. I appreciate they are still, I would say potentially they need to look at that kind of points and goals, maybe contributing a lot more goals. That's the only fear factor, is that you could have a scenario where it goes down to the final day of the season, which we'd love to have, right? But it could be decided on as much as goal difference. And as it currently stands, Inter are much more favourable in that kind of area. So I think that's probably an area that maybe Conte needs to look at and kind of look at these games and go, we need more than one goal. We can't afford to just have a singular goal to win a game. But favourable games, it's fair to say I would fancy Napoli now going into the latter part of this kind of season now to kind of turn it around.
Well, I think you've kind of pinpointed the one reason why I think they might not do it, and that's the attack. They need to figure out the attack. The whole game, it did ultimately take them until the 87th minute or whatever it was to finally crack through. And the whole game, it was just pretty easy to defend from Inter. Obviously, there was a few, last-minute slide tackles, a few saves from Martinez, but there was no player who was really willing to, take a risk and go past his man and really be unpredictable. And I think that's something that Conte and Napoli need to figure out. And that's what happens when, David Neres is injured and you've sold Kvaratskhelia, and all of a sudden you've got all your creativity is kind of gone and the players you have left are a little bit pedestrian, and you think, okay, I just think that they need to get more out of that attack. Scott McTominay will get you maybe 3 or 4 more goals this season, but you can't depend on him to get goals consistently.
True.
So I think, that attack definitely needs figuring out. Ultimately, I think a decent game. I enjoyed it. I think there was a lot more quality than I predicted the week before. I thought it was going to be a lot lower quality game than that with the form the two teams were in. But let's leave that game there. And let's go to a real game of low quality on one side. And let's talk about Milan 1, Lazio 2. Well, it all started off really with the protests in the Curva Sud. They enter the game on the 15-minute mark, demanding Cardinale sells and leaves. And as they unpolitely asked him to leave, Zaccagni opened the scoring with Lazio's first attack of the game. It kind of felt fairly predictable. Like Milan had so much of the ball but did nothing with it. Lazio, very, very disciplined, very structured, but on the attack, absolutely clinical and decisive. Let's talk about Lazio, I think, because the Milan chat's going to be a little bit longer, I imagine. But I found this a really frustrating performance because Lazio easily were the better side.
Yeah.
Were easily in control of the game. But the whole time I was thinking, you can play better than this. You can do better than this. You should be 3-4-0 up and you should be like dancing in the San Siro. But again, their attack just felt like that one pass too many, or someone not in the right position, or a shot at the wrong time, or I still felt like they really let Milan off the hook with what should have been a more decisive attacking performance, right?
Yeah, I feel that was what was lacking from their game in particular. If they had a much more clinical edge to them, I think the likes of Isaacson had shots from distances, which really did threaten the Milan goal. But they every time they kind of threatened you, like they need to take a chance, they need to make this count, they need to score, because this was even at 1-0, Rory, where they had plenty of the ball, they had plenty of the opportunities, but they couldn't break through and make a chance count. And it was just getting to a point where even when, Pavlovic is sent off for Milan, you're kind of still thinking, right, this is just laps or come into the laps of Lazio's hands. All they have to do is see it out, and maybe just counter and score. And then that's game over. But somehow they still managed to give the initiative to Milan, who, in fairness to them, they fought really hard to get that goal. And they seem to, ironically, a bit like Wycombe Wanderers, play better with 10 men. And then before you know it, it counted in terms of it needed a really potentially controversial decision. We'll talk about the merits in a moment, but potentially one of those moments for them to get themselves back into the match. So as you allude to, I think Marco Baroni would have been pulling his hair out had that been still a draw at full time, because you're kind of working out how on earth have Lazio kind of not made the most of this. But like you, I was so impressed by Lazio, the way they went about it. They really did take it to Milan, and Milan were just awful in that first half. Absolute. I mean, the boos from the whole stadium. I've heard a lot of people say that's the first time that they've heard such almost Everton-like atmosphere in the San Siro.
San Siro becoming Goodison Park.
Yeah, exactly. But to a point that they've never heard it that bad. There's been bad times for both clubs, Inter and Milan, at that stadium, but they've never heard it so toxic to a point that it was so bad for the players. I think they even alluded to the fact that afterwards that the likes of Gabbia, for example, saying he found it difficult to play in those conditions. I mean, can you imagine being on that pitch and hearing that? It's just dreadful. But yeah, I mean, we also have to have that conversation about Milan and Conceicao, and where did Milan go from here? Because they are now 9th in the league. This is probably their worst ever season since probably I can only think of where they've been in this kind of position is when they defended the scudetto under Capello, I want to say.
Okay,
they found themselves in a similar position where they were just dreadful that following a season. So yeah, I think they probably would have said, "Oh, that's just a fluke season in itself." But this is poor. This is poor. And when Fonseca's got a better points per game ratio than Sergio Conceicao now, you just I don't know where do you go from here, Rory? I can't explain it now.
He got sent off in France this weekend, by the way.
No, he's a nutter.
Where did Milan go? Bloody hell. I feel like I'm just going to copy and paste every Man United chat into this bit now and then just swap the names over. Instead of the Glazers, just say Cardinale, and in case of Ten Hag, just say Conceicao. I think getting rid of Conceicao doesn't solve anything. I saw them, they want Fabregas. Right, okay. You want the least experienced manager in the league who's
Yeah.
doing a very good job at Como, right? Doing an incredible job at Como. They all love him. But Cesc, please, for all the money in the world, do not fucking go to Milan.
I don't think it
like,
will. No.
It sums up, when I saw those stories, and I saw today, Conceicao, the Milan board have basically said, or they've let it be known, that they're happy with Conceicao, but it's basically a game-by-game basis at this point. So basically, they're waiting to sack him. Being linked to managers like Fabregas, and then they want, I don't know, or Italiano or Palladino, and you're like, it's just throwing shit at the wall and seeing how much sticks. Palladino is having a very difficult season with Fiorentina. Like, it was good for a bit, and now it's really not good. And Italiano is doing okay with Bologna. He gets some pretty headline performances and results, but if you look at where they are, it's the games they should win that they don't, and it's an okay season from them. And then, okay, you want Fabregas. Okay, he's had half a decent season so far with Como. Like, it just feels like there's zero fucking plan at that club at all. They're employing people who don't do anything. Zlatan, I don't know what he's there to do. Like,
sit in a car with speed. That's what he's doing.
Yeah. Sit in the car and do nothing. Say nothing, do nothing. That's a good boy. Like, I don't know. I think you could bring in the fucking ghost of... You could bring in an Igor Saki 50 years ago or however long it was, and he's still not turning it around, right? I just think you might as well now. And I said it with fucking Fonseca. Why didn't they just listen? Just stick with him until the end of the season and see if he figures it out. Because look, nothing fucking changed. They got rid of Fonseca and he went, right, okay, here we go. Everybody behind the new manager. And even the commentators were saying during the game last night, this feels like the end of a managerial tenure. But he's been in the job like 2 months. And you're like,
exactly.
So you might as well have fucking stuck with Fonseca. Let him try and get the ideas across. Let him just see out the season and see if he can get some players on side, or he can figure out exactly what he wants to do with Leao and Teo and how quickly he can sell them to Saudi Arabia. Like, whatever it is, like, because now you're starting from square one again. You're in an even worse situation because the players are learning again mid-season. Conceicao isn't the easiest person to get on with. He's already tried to fight.
No.
Was it Gabbia, or I think it was Gabbia?
Calabria.
Calabria, club captain, tried to fight him. Like, clearly not the easiest guy to get on with.
No.
So quite possibly the players are even more pissed off now. The football isn't working because they're learning halfway through a season. And what have you achieved? You just got to pay someone else to be on gardening leave in 3 weeks' time. Like, I can completely understand why Milan fans are absolutely fuming. But all that being said as well, the players were embarrassing in that first half. Embarrassing. And for most of the second half, until Chukwueze, who, by the way, this is the second time he's come on and got a goal. Was it the Venezia game? He came on and rescued it. Right? A player that most of the fans laugh at and are fairly, pretty...
vocal.
Oh, this guy, right? He's like standing out coming off the bench because he's actually running and wants to bloody get involved. It was a hell of a header. Like, the finish was insane. But, like, he came on and instantly made a difference. But he stands out because the rest of the dross that was on the pitch for the rest of the game, like, I can't watch Leao anymore. I just can't watch him. I would be chasing him out of my club with a pitchfork at this point. Like, he gets an assist, so his fucking FOTMOB rating's great, so we'll be delighted. But I thought he was so ineffective the entire game. Everyone in their attack was just like, there was no imagination, no fight, nothing. It was just like, oh, if it goes in, it goes in. If it doesn't, then I still get paid. Like, I don't know. I just found it really, really depressing. The midfield didn't work. Like, and Pavlovic, again, it's a stupid tackle. It's a red card, but he's been one of their better players this season. Since he came into the team, he's genuinely been like, because it was that Venezia game again that he started and he got the goal disallowed. He was due to be
sold as well that weekend.
And he was about to be sold. And then he proved himself. And even then, it kind of sums up where Milan are at the moment, I suppose. But like, now he's missing for the next couple of games. And well, who comes into the defence? A Tomori that you've actively tried to sell and basically told is shite. Like, is he the one that comes in now? Like, thank God Milan can't get relegated, but they've got sod all to play for. Like,
I know.
If they could put a run together, they could still get into Europe because Roma have overtaken them now, and we'll get on to them. So there is still something there for the team to play for. But they played like it was May and Crystal Palace.
Literally.
Like, you know what I mean? It was mad.
It was absolutely mad. And you also forget, I think, in your whole commentary, you failed to mention Teo Hernandez and what a dreadful a performance that was. His challenge, by the way,
How
on,
wasn't
was it
that a red card?
Murasic? Yeah, exactly. How wasn't that? And to be fair, Milan fans have been calling him out for a while now. They've been calling him out for what? Is he a left back because he doesn't put in the performances of a left back anymore? He strolls around that pitch and jogs back at a casual pace. That was very evident for that goal as well, by the way. His space is exploited by, I want to say it's Dele Bashuaro or Tushana, who basically exploits that space. The ball is crossed in by Marosic and Mike Maignan palms it in the direction of Zaccagni. That's all down to Teo losing possession, losing his like position in that respect. He casually goes about his business, and then he wonders why he gets suddenly dropped because he's been that poor in the games.
And that's a coward's. That was a coward's. It wasn't even a tackle.
It was a coward's.
It was a coward's trick. Like they're competing for the ball in the air, and he just throws his back into his knee. He throws his leg into his knee for no reason. Just like massive fucking frustration at how shit you are and how shit the game's going. Let's just fucking hurt someone. Like, I think it sums him up pretty perfectly. And again, he's someone else. That whole left wing of Milan, they'd be like, off you go. Let's just get you out of here because you're costing us too many bloody games.
Yeah.
But let's kind of go to the end of the game. The important, because we're talking here like Lazio kind of threw it away, but they did get a win, and they got a win that they fully deserved. Like, we'll talk about the penalty, but their play absolutely deserved that win. Yeah. Like, there's not a Milan fan there that would have felt like lucky walking out with 1-1. Now, Pedro continues to age like a fine wine. Incredible. Really well taken penalty. But I know it's by the letter of the law, it's a penalty. Maignan goes steaming through, takes Isaacson out, isn't it? Mm-hmm. For me, the ball's already going out of play. So I think the kind of play's done. He's not going to score. Or should that be a penalty? I know it's by the letter of law it is, but I just thought I don't like that is a penalty. How did you feel about it?
I felt it was bordering on not being given because I think Isaacson's looking for a touch. He's not necessarily. He realizes that the ball's going, like you say,
he
and
kicks
there's nothing
the ball
for
away
him.
As well.
Yeah, essentially, he hits it too hard ahead of himself to make it look more genuine, if that makes sense. Yeah. So it's almost by the virtue of the referee has to go to VAR and look at the incident and kind of say that's a penalty. But if I'm the referee, I'm kind of giving that as a dive. I'm afraid. I think Lazio is so fortunate in that circumstance because actually Isaacson doesn't need to do that. No. Doesn't need to do it, but unfortunately, he's just kind of rushed the blood to the head. I've got to make something count here because I've really screwed up with that ball. And Mike Maignan, I think it's his stupidity to come out as well. I don't know if he necessarily needs to come out and jump in that. All he has to do is let the ball go run out. That's all he has to do. Stand up. Don't even dive in like that. And unfortunately, that's what cost Milan the game itself. Because I was, even when Pedro is lining up, by the way, the amount of players were trying to put him off and really screw it up. I mean, I did fear for Pedro. I did think that he might screw this up as well because you could see there was a little bit of tension in his eyes as well when he was taking it. But fair play to him. Again, like you say, like a fine wine, he seems to be just developing this like Indian summer at the moment and really putting in performances for Lazio, and they needed that. They needed that because I don't think there's anyone on that pitch that could do it apart from maybe Matteo Zaccagni for Lazio.
Well, a hell of a season he's having as well, by the way. He's really he's starting to come in, second half of the season, he's really kicking on. I think he had a bit of a quiet start to the season, but he's really kicking on recently. Again, the determination to get on the end of that ball for the first goal as well, like the incisive quick break was really impressive. But I think overall Lazio undoubtedly deserved that win. But bit of a soft penalty. And the ref looked at it on the screen for 0.3 seconds. He just looked.
It was very quick.
Okay, that's
very quick.
Straight away. I was like, okay, cool, right.
It was almost like he's already been talked about in his earpiece that this is what's happened, basically. Just have a look and check it. Just before we leave this, I wanted to call out and give some flowers to Guendouzi and Rovella. I thought they were so good for Lazio. And also, Is it just me, or has Tavares just gone to the gym and pumped up some like weights or something?
It's huge.
He looks like a beast. He looks like an absolute beast. Like, I think he might have dropped down in the pace and stamina piece though, because I don't think he was as paced as he was. He looked like Akinfenwa trying to run down a wing. By the way, that's what he reminded me of.
He was, well, I saw some real hyperbole today saying that there's never been a player like him in Serie A. I was like, well, there has, but he's a very, very good player. He's absolutely killing it. But there was still a few moments in this game where he tried a funny touch and it went out of play, and I was like, there he is. But I have to say, Guendouzi and Ravella, a fantastic midfield, but possibly the moaniest midfield in the league. I feel like both of them do not leave the ref alone the entire 90 minutes. Between the two of them, they've both got like really moany faces. I've got a lot of time for it. My girlfriend keeps telling me that I like Lazio too much because they're always on the telly. I do really enjoy this Lazio team.
They're a good side.
They're a really good side to watch. I really enjoyed them. But very quickly, Baroni getting his flowers again. An incredible job that he's doing at Lazio. Yeah. Really, really excited to see where he can take this team. Still in Europe. I reckon he can take them pretty far. It's pretty exciting to see what he can do. But we're going to leave that game there for now. And we're going to move on down to the capital. Yes, to Lazio's bitter rivals. Roma 2, Como 1. Ranieri said playing Como was like going to the dentist without any anesthetic. Well, he managed to survive, and they did come back from a goal down. Adam, this is a huge win for Roma. They're in incredible form, and the European dream is not dead.
It's not. 11 games unbeaten now. Ranieri doing a fantastic job. They did have to come back from behind, though, in this particular match. Como probably edging it slightly in terms of the early exchanges, and what a hit by Da Cunha. What a goal it was. Superbly finished, but a lot of credit has to go to Roma. A bit fortuitous, it's fair to say, because I think they were kind of forced into having to apply a bit more pressure onto Como and Salamakers with a shot which gets a deflection. So making it a bit fortuitous, but Salamakers almost trying to do a bit of a DeMarco celebration afterwards. I don't know what he was trying to do, but he's certainly trying to pull that off. And then literally minutes later, then the German defender Mark Kempf, gets sent off for a second yellow card, which I felt was a bit harsh, but I could also see why it was given. Unfortunately, it was just the nature that he didn't really go for the ball, if that makes sense. But because he was already on a yellow, it was a second yellow, and made it more worse for Como in that respect.
That's Ross's German cousin, right? Ross Kempf? Is that him? Ross's German cousin,
literally was, yeah. He looks as pissed off as Ross Kemp would be. But you have to hand it, what a fantastic winner for Roma as well. Dench nicking the ball, getting across into the box, and Dovbyk kind of doing what Dovbyk was known for, which was kind of being in the box, just scoring those kind of style of goals and giving Roma the winner here as well. But yeah, really good from a Roma perspective. Como will be gutted given their recent form. I think there was certain players, in particular the likes of Paz, for example. He has an opportunity in the first half where he just doesn't, I think he just tries too hard to take on the opportunity first time as opposed to maybe being a bit more composed on the ball. Diao as well, another player that we've been speaking out recently, had a quietish game. So I think across the board, it was just one of those games where just the consistency from a Como perspective going into this game was missing. And something more noticeable was seeing Dele Alli on the bench. Dele Alli, for the first time in a while, potentially getting himself back into game contention. But Fabregas wasn't happy, was he, Rory?
No, he didn't seem best pleased. I did see a lovely scene of him and Ranieri after the game, though. They were hugging and talking, and it was very, very friendly and amicable. But I think he, I don't know. I like seeing him get all passionate and worked up. Yeah. But I think from what I saw from Como, it was a very loose performance. I think Kakare, in particular, had a lot of loose passes, really just not the kind of typical performance you'd expect from him. Diao as well, there was a few moments where the ball just like spun off and you were like, it's just not clicking today. But I do just, because every time I talk about Roma, I have to talk about him. Shomurodov, again, in the first half, I love the job he does. I just love the work he does on the pitch. He doesn't, Like,
It's not spectacular,
no,
but he gets
it's
it
not
done.
spectacular, but he gets the job done. He comes off at half time, and it means that Dovbyk can come on with fresh legs. I just love that he's a proper utility player, and he will get 3 or 4 goals across this season at some point. But I was impressed with him a little bit. But yeah, who'd have thought Ranieri would be able to figure out how to get the best out of a striker by just, playing to his strengths?
Yeah, exactly. Playing the whole team to their strengths in terms of formation as well, right? It's taken the best part of 2 managers to get to that stage. So, hey, we got there in the end.
There in the end. They got there in the end. Stop complaining. Yes, I think Roma could really be on a charge for Europe. And if Ranieri turns around this season, where a few months ago we were like, if Roma don't beat Verona, they could be in trouble and get relegated to they could be pushing for Europe. That is a hell of a turnaround. The only thing that disappoints me, and this is nothing against Claudio, but I saw that they're looking at extending his contract. It's like, no, don't.
No, yeah, I saw that, yeah.
Find the other manager. Don't be, because you did this with De Rossi, don't be tricked into it. Find the manager you want and get the manager you want.
Yeah.
As much as I love Ranieri, he is the interim, and Roma need to move on and make a decision. So I
100%.
really, really hope they do that. But I also hope he delivers them Europe before he leaves.
That'd be amazing.
So elsewhere, the other results we had. Oh, we're running out of time, but I'm going to squeeze it in. Cesare Casadei, he scored an absolute worldie against Monza. Picked up man of the match. Adam, what do you have to say for yourself? The goal was incredible, eh?
To my defense, he was playing against Subucho team, wasn't he? What was that Monza defense? That's all I'm going to say. Like, that was... I mean, like my little boys, when he's playing against other teams, I think I've seen better defending. Like, literally, that was dreadful. In fairness to Monza, and this is the only caveat I will give them.
Go on.
They actually had a bit more attacking intent. Yes. They had shots, they had opportunities. They were just terrible in terms of transition and didn't retain the ball very well. And when it came to the defensive moments, they looked like they were going to concede every time. Against the Torino side, by the way, they didn't have a shot until the 40th minute. Yeah. So, in Elfmas, when he put him ahead, I mean, that's all you need to know is 2 teams that don't really want to attack. And that was kind of summed up by this game. But I think it's just the quality of Torino that saw them out, in fairness. And it's important points for Torino in the grand scheme of things. That was really important. But I think, isn't there a record, Rory, that we want to call out with Monza?
Chievo Verona and Salernitana currently hold the record. From what I could see, since it's been 3 points for a win and 20 teams in the league, they have the record for the lowest points total, if you're not Juventus for match fixing, of 17. Now, Monza are currently on 14 points, and we're basically we're bringing the derby discourse to Serie A. I feel like it doesn't get talked about enough. Monza genuinely are at risk of becoming the worst ever Serie A team. Adam, do you think they could do it? Do you think they could achieve the impossible and finish on less than 17 points?
I'm having a look at their fixtures, and I think there's a very good cause that they could definitely not get as many points as we think. I'm looking at the fixtures, right? And I can only count 1, maybe two games where they could get more than a point, and that's at home to Empoli, and the other one was at home, or was it away? Sorry. Away to Venezia.
Those are the 2 games I pinpointed.
Those are the 2 games.
Yeah.
They're the only 2 games. The others, I think it's more likely that the visitors or the team that they've got to visit are going to pick up the points.
Yeah.
So I think it's feasible. And listeners, please fill us in if you feel differently. But I think it's feasible that we could see this being the worst side in Serie A history.
Yeah, I think even that Venezia and Empoli game, I've got them down as draws. I don't think they get a win for the rest of the season. I honestly think Empoli aren't that bad, and Venezia just drawn 0-0 this weekend against Atalanta. They're not great, but they're not that bad. So I think we could be witnessing history, guys. If only Thank God
Until they
Silvio
turn
isn't
up
here to see
at
this.
Juventus and pick up 3 points, right?
Yeah, well, exactly, yeah. But also very quickly for Torino, Elmas, incredible signing for them. Had a really good start to his return to Serie A. And Lazaro on the right wing, just removing all defensive responsibilities from him, is working quite well.
Yeah.
He got another assist here. Maybe they've cracked him.
Maybe.
And of course, Casadei, just a hell of a finish, but he was given all of the time in the world, and they invited him to do it. Elsewhere, very quickly, let's go through Bologna 2, Cagliari 1. They came from a goal behind. I think they did. Orsolini, of course, with 2 goals, 1 penalty. Yeah. Big win for them as Italiano continues their crusade for Europe. Genoa drew 1-1 with Empoli. Vasquez, yes, for the Fantacalcio, got a goal, but Grassi opening the scoring there. Yeah. Juventus are currently 1-0 up against Hellas Verona.
Boo.
Kefren Turam is keeping Motta in a job for another week. And the other games very quickly. Fiorentina beat Lecce 1-0. And Udinese beat Parma 1-0. Penalty drama, but this time Tovan took it and he scored
Luca gave it to him as well.
Luca gave it to him. And everyone's friends again. So, that it's a happy ending, ultimately. That's nice. Fiorentina scraped past Lecce, but a big win for them. Yep. Robin Gosens.
Atalanta as well.
And Atalanta. If only we had time to talk about how they are determined to not take advantage of anything. The stats I saw from this game were pretty ridiculous. They had 18 shots, six on target, I think, XG of 1.94, absolutely dominated the game. When the heat is on, they just don't get it done, Adam. It's really, this is what's going to count them out, right? That's 2 weekends in a row now they've had the opportunity to leapfrog and they've not done it.
And if there's a game to sum up their season, it is this one, because they almost gave it to Venezia to score an easy goal. Martin de Royn on the halfway line scuffs a ball that was meant to pump into the box, and it was a 2-on-1 situation where it was Zerbin. All he has to do is pass it across, and there's an easy tap in, put it beyond Carnesecchi, and it's 1-0 Venezia. And De Royn manages, with his lack of stamina, to somehow get a challenge in and put him off. It was one of those where Venezia, you could see their kind of fans going absolutely apeshit in the stands. Like, what on earth was going on? Like, you can imagine the phrases that were going on there. But I mean, Atalanta, in credit to them, they did hit the post numerous times through Cuadrado as well as Zappacosta. Zappacosta did it from the weirdest angle possible as well. It was like almost from the byline and somehow managed to curve it that hit the other post. It was unreal. Lookman looks great. It just lacked that final touch. That's all it was. It was a final touch. But that is the reason why Atalanta might struggle to be like Scudetto favourites now in terms of that title race. I think they've done really well to be in that top 4 again, I think, Rory. Yeah. Unfortunately, it's just the recent weeks, I think, it's unfolded and killed their season off almost, because it's just up and down like a roller coaster ride with Atalanta. You just don't know which side you're going to get.
Yeah, the second the heat is on, they do not do well. But I've still got money on you, Atalanta. Come on, you could still win me a bit of money at the end of the season, please. That would be absolutely delightful. And I'd have a nice little weekend to Bergamo to celebrate with you. But guys, that is all of the Serie A action this weekend. We told you there was a lot of it. We're going to take a very quick break. And when we come back, we'll be looking forward to the European action midweek. We'll see you there. Benvenuti, bentornati. It's time to go through all the European action with me. Here we go. Starting in the Champions League, we've got Inter heading out to Robin van Persie's Feyenoord. Please, Inter, I'm begging, make him cry. That's all I want to see. It's his first game in charge of Feyenoord. Let's hope they get battered. In the Europa League, we have Lazio travelling out to Czechia as they go to take on Victoria Pilsen. Tricky place to go, that, but I suspect Lazio can get the job done. And then Roma hosting the hipsters' favourites, Athletic Club. That's going to be a really interesting game, that one. I think I'll be quite intrigued to watch that. And in the Conference League, Andrea, I'm sure, has actually got an interesting game in the Conference League, one with something on the line where there might be a bit of a challenge as Fiorentina go away to Panathinaikos. That is going to be a really tricky one. I've played with them on Football Manager, so I know they've got some very good players. Ioannidis, I think how you say it, is a very exciting player. So it could be a tricky one for Fiorentina, that. But please, guys, just do it for the coefficient. Serie A needs the coefficient.
Needs it now. It's desperate.
One of you needs to get through. Just one of you. One in each. That's all we're asking. Just do it for the coefficient.
No pressure.
Adam, what do we have in Serie A this weekend?
Yes, round of 28 games start on Friday evening, where you are spoilt, listener. 7:45, Calgary at home to Genoa, before we then face Saturday's games starting at 2 p.m. We have got Como at home to Venezia, Parma at home to Torino, and then we enter the 5 p.m. kickoff time, which is Lecce at home to Milan. I fancy Lecce for that one. Before, at 7:45 p.m. kickoff time, Inter at home at the San Siro to Monza. We then move into Sunday's fixtures, starting at 11:30 a.m. Hellas Verona at home to Bologna, before at 2 p.m. we've got Napoli at home to Fiorentina. Then at 5 p.m. we've got Empoli at home to Roma, before at 7:45, quite a juicy game, it's fair to say, Rory, here, Juventus at home to Atalanta. Before on Monday night, it's not our favoured 5:30 fixture slot, unfortunately, but at 7:45 we've got Lazio at home to Udinese. And that is your round of 28, Rory.
Well, guys, that is the show. Listener, thank you as always for joining us. We appreciate it so much that you choose to spend your time with us. It means the world to us. You can find us on all the social medias at Anglo-Italian Pod, apart from X, Twitter. I'm going to keep calling it Twitter. On Twitter, at Italian Anglo Pod. If you're on YouTube, hit the like and subscribe button down here, please. If you're on Apple Podcasts, I know the majority of you listen on Apple Pods. I've looked at the numbers. I know it's the majority of you. Can you please leave us a rating on the app? I'm watching you, right? Please leave us a rating on the app and a review. That would be fantastic. Go and check out the FA Cup show this weekend. Yes. I had a men's mental health break from Arsenal, and it was lovely. And there was loads of action for us to break down. So please go and find us over there. And most importantly, guys, enjoy your week, and we'll see you next time. Ciao. A dopo.
Ciao, ciao.